I just love this pattern. It's a robe jacket and you'll want to wear it at home and all around town. The pattern is a free download from Peppermint Magazine. I shared a Scrappy version a while back that I made from remnant linen pieces, and I'll link that short process video below. Let the fabric set the tone for where you'll show off your jacket. Let's get sewing. Here is the wrong side of my back bodice piece, and I'm going to prepare the pleats at the neckline. I'm going to fold the material down the middle, right sides together, and I'm going to draw a line straight down from my neckline notch to where my pleat marking ends from the pattern piece. Now I'll pin that line in place to secure, and I'll sew from the top to the bottom of my line, backstitching at the end to secure. Then I'll open my back piece out flat, and I'm going to press flat my pleat so that it's pressed evenly on either side of my stitching line. Now that I've created the pleat, I'm going to flip my fabric to the right side, and I'm going to place my front and back pieces right sides together and pin those shoulder seams. Now I'll sew both of my shoulder seams with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and finish the raw edges. Then I'll press the seams toward the back. Here are my front and back pieces opened out at the shoulder seam that we just created. I'm going to place one of my sleeve pieces right sides together with those front and back bodice edges, aligning the raw edges of that armhole opening, and pin in place. Once that side is pinned, repeat for the other sleeve on the opposite side of the bodice pieces. Now we'll sew these sleeves in place on both sides with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, finish the raw edges, and press those seams toward the bodice. For the belt loop piece, we're going to fold it in half lengthwise, wrong sides together. Once we've formed and pressed a crease down the center, we're going to fold both of the long raw edges to the crease on both sides. Then we'll fold it in half once more along the original center crease, so we have a long strip with all of the raw edges enclosed. Then we can pin that open long edge in place. Repeat for both belt loops. Then take it to your machine and edge stitch those open edges closed. Here is the right side of the fabric for my back bodice piece, right underneath the bottom of the sleeve. Here is the marking from the pattern piece for where to place the belt loop. I'm going to fold the belt loop in half and placing those raw edges at the marking. And I'll do this on both sides. Then I'll baste both of my belt loops in place. I've placed my front and back bodice pieces right sides together as well as their sleeves. Now I'll pin the side seam and the underarm seam. And then repeat to pin your opposite side seam and underarm seam. Now we can sew from the bottom of the sleeve to the bottom of the garment with a 3/8 inch seam allowance in one continuous stitch. Repeat on both sides, finish the raw edges, and then press them toward the back of the garment. Now to hem the bottom of the sleeve, we're going to press the raw edge to the wrong side by 1/2 inch. Then press it once more by an additional inch all the way around the bottom of both sleeves. Now that I have those hems pressed in place, I'm going to edge stitch close to that upper inner fold all the way around. Place your collar pieces right sides together and pin one short seam. Sew this one short edge with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and press the seam open. Now that the two pieces are connected and I have my center back seam, I'm going to fold the entire piece wrong sides together all the way across. Now with this collar piece still folded in half and the raw edges meeting, I'm going to place it right sides together with my bodice neckline and start pinning at the center back. Then I'll continue pinning around the neckline all the way around the front bodice piece until I'm at the bottom edge of the front bodice piece, and I'll repeat on the opposite side. So now I have this collar piece pinned all around the neckline, all the way down to the bottom of both front bodice pieces. Now starting at the bottom of one front bodice piece, I'm going to sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way up, around the back neckline and down to the bottom of the opposite front bodice piece. Then I'm going to finish those raw edges and press them toward the bodice. Here's the bottom of one of my front bodice pieces, and here's the seam allowance which I've pressed toward the bodice all the way around. Now I'm going to top stitch that seam allowance in place so that it always stays nicely oriented toward the bodice side. I'm going to edge stitch close to the edges of my finishing stitches all the way around the entire seam that we just created. Here is the bottommost edge of the jacket, and I'm going to press it to the wrong side just as I did for the bottoms of the sleeves. I'll press it first by 1/2 inch to the wrong side, then I'll press it once more by 1 inch to create the hem all the way across. Now that my hem is pressed in place from one bottom edge of the front piece all the way across the bottom to the opposite bottom edge of the opposite front piece, just as we did for the bottoms of the sleeves, we're going to edge stitch close to that upper inner fold all the way across the bottom edge. To create the belt, I'll place both of my belt pieces right sides together and pin and sew one short edge with a 3/8 inch seam allowance just as we did for the collar pieces. I've pressed that seam open. Now, just as we did for the belt loop pieces, fold this belt in half wrong sides together straight across. Once we've formed that center crease, we're going to press both of the raw edges to the wrong side by 3/8 inch on both sides. Once you have both of your long edges pressed by 3/8 inch, also press the outer shorter edges on both sides to the wrong side by 3/8 inch. Then fold your entire belt in half along that original center crease with all of those raw edges tucked under and pin in place. Now I'll edge stitch starting from the bottom of one short edge to the upper corner, edge stitch straight across the upper edge of the belt, doing the same to close the short edge on the other side. Now we can place our belt through our belt loops, and your robe jacket is complete. Thank you for joining me for this sew along. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future sewing tutorials, and I'll see you in the next video.